Given the fact that airBaltic's fleet is made up entirely of Airbus A220s, it seems only fitting that we're examining the airline's fleet in 2022. The only thing better would have been to publish this video on February 22nd, but better late than never. Despite the carrier having an extremely homogeneous fleet of aircraft, there's still a good deal of interesting history and strategy surrounding the airline's decision to go with this popular little jet. As such, let's today take an in-depth look at the airBaltic fleet. If you're only now hearing about airBaltic for the first time, you'd be forgiven. The airline hasn't yet operated any transatlantic services to North America, even if all of its current aircraft were built in Montreal and flew across the Atlantic to reach their new home. Historically, though, the carrier has limited its operations to Europe, Central Asia, and parts of the Middle East. These days, the airline's longest flights take it from Riga in Latvia to Tenerife in the west and Dubai in the east. Both flights outbound currently take around 6.5 hours, while the flight back from Dubai can take as long as 7.5. This wasn't the case before February 2022. However, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and subsequent airspace bans have forced the carrier to fly a longer route. Normally, the airline's A220s would have operated much of this flight through Russian airspace. These days, the aircraft must not only avoid Russia, but also Belarus and Ukraine. While the airline has decided to axe its services to Armenia and Azerbaijan due to these developments, other services are able to continue, something that airline CEO Martin Gauss attributes to the fuel efficiency of the Airbus A220. Here are some of the things he had to say during an interview in March.
Therefore, the higher fuel cost, our best offset against it is the Airbus A220-300, because we have 25% less fuel burn this year than we had the years before when we were using different aircraft. So that's the only thing where we have savings.
So it's clear that airBaltic is happy with its fleet of Airbus A220s, but how did this love affair begin? And what growing pains did it experience along the way? Let's first look back at airBaltic's pre-A220 years. It was actually about a full decade ago that airBaltic signed a letter of intent for up to 20 Bombardier C-Series aircraft. This would see the airline acquire 10 CS300s and take purchase rights on a further 10 CS300 jetliners. As we look to replace the older aircraft in our fleet, matching the requirements of our business plan, we reviewed the narrow-body platforms from the major airframers and determined that the all-new CS300 aircraft was the best fit. Airline CEO Martin Gauss said at the time. The older aircraft Gauss was referring to consisted of Boeing 737-300s and 737-500s. At the time of the announcement, some of these jets were around 20 years of age. Due to the fact that the C-Series was still in development at the time and would not enter service until 2017 with Swiss, it was important for airBaltic to have a modern replacement lined up to take over for its aging 737s. The July 2012 letter of intent would eventually turn into a firm order in December of the same year. At this point in time, the airline was expecting to receive its first C-Series aircraft in the fourth quarter of 2015. Speaking on the aircraft's progress and his anticipation for a first delivery, this is what airBaltic's CEO had to say at the time.
We are currently limited with our aircraft to either 70 seats or 145 seats. CS300 will be replacing our older aircraft. The C-Series will be a game changer, I'm sure, because if you look at the cockpit, it's brand new, all is new. There's space in the cabin, there's wide body comfort, big overhead bins, efficient aircraft. Really looking forward now to receive the CS300, as we all would like to fly in it and use it with our passengers, so we're really looking forward to this.
Along the way, the C-Series program faced delays, but airBaltic held on. In November 2015, it was stated that the airline was expecting to take delivery of its first CS300 in the second half of 2016. By this point, the airline had adjusted its order, committing to a firm order for 13 and retaining options for 7. Months before the first C-Series entered service with airBaltic, the airline moved to exercise its options for 7 aircraft, converting them into firm orders alongside the existing 13. The adjusted timeline for entry into service held true, and airBaltic operated the first ever commercial flight of the CS300 as the variant's global launch customer. The successful December 2016 flight took 120 passengers from Riga to Amsterdam, paving the way for more Bombardier aircraft to be delivered. 2017 would be the true test of the CS300's ability to perform consistent and reliable commercial service. During this year, airBaltic flew the aircraft to European destinations like Amsterdam, Barcelona, London and Paris, but also launched its longest direct service with the CS300, flying between Riga and Abu Dhabi. It was also in 2017 that the Latvian carrier set a new world record. Its newest CS300 turnaround for the first commercial flight took only 50 minutes after being delivered from Canada. On its one-year anniversary of operations, the airline had taken delivery of 7 of the Bombardier jets. Things were looking great for airBaltic, but it was a different story on the other side of the world for the CS300's designer and producer, Bombardier. The Canadian plane maker would be embroiled in a bitter dispute with Boeing after winning a significant order from Delta Airlines. Accusing Bombardier of illegal trade practices, Boeing convinced the US Department of Commerce to impose a 220% tax on every C-Series aircraft sold in the United States. While the US International Trade Commission would eventually rule in Bombardier's favor and overturn the tariffs, the plane maker had already agreed to essentially give Airbus a controlling stake in the C-Series program to ensure its survival. Back in Europe, however, airBaltic was unaffected by the turmoil, seemingly doing well with its handful of brand new Bombardier aircraft. Thrilled with the results of its shiny new investments, the carrier moved to order even more of the C-Series aircraft. In May of 2019, the carrier made a firm purchase of 30 with options for an additional 30. At the same time, the carrier made it clear that it wanted to go all in on this aircraft and phase out other types that it was operating. This would see airBaltic eventually phase out its use of the Bombardier Dash 8 Q400 turboprop, of which it had 12. By the end of 2018, the airline would have 14 CS300s and 22 by 2019. Of course, by now, airBaltic would no longer be operating the Bombardier C-Series. This, of course, would be due to Airbus taking a controlling stake in the aircraft program in 2017 and rebranding the aircraft as the A220 less than a year later. While airBaltic's experience with the Airbus A220 has been fairly good, 2 years of steadily operating the type would reveal issues with its next-generation Pratt & Whitney geared turbofan engines. In October of 2019, Swiss grounded its entire fleet of Airbus A220 aircraft, pending detailed engine checks. The Swiss carrier encountered a third serious engine issue in the space of 4 months, and thus decided that none of its A220 aircraft were to fly until detailed checks had been undertaken. With this disappointing news emerging, it was revealed that airBaltic had been experiencing engine issues with its A220s as well. Indeed, in its first 2 years of operating the type, the airline was reported to have replaced 50 engines. Having just 13 aircraft during that period, this meant that almost every engine was replaced twice on average. Of course, it's more likely that the carrier's older aircraft would have had more engine changes, while newer aircraft would have had fewer. The airline told Simple Flying that engine replacements were taking place due to a variety of reasons, including planned and scheduled replacements. airBaltic would go on to experience 2 public incidents concerning its A220 engines. One took place in February of 2020 when a flight from Riga to Malaga had to divert to Bordeaux due to an engine failure. Then, in July 2021, an airBaltic A220 automatically shut down both engines immediately after making contact with the runway. While there are no injuries and the landing was performed safely, such an occurrence was certainly a cause for concern. Shortly after the first engine incident, however, the pandemic would take its toll on the aviation industry, and airBaltic, like most other airlines, would be forced to ground most of its fleet due to travel restrictions and a lack of passengers. During this period, the carrier's 12 Dash 8 turboprops would go into storage. 2 full years have passed, and all of these aircraft remain in storage in Riga, unlikely to ever fly for airBaltic again. With industry recovery now well underway, the airline now has 33 A220-300s in its fleet, with another 17 yet to be delivered. The all-A220 fleet's average age now sits at about 3 years, with its most recent being delivered in February of 2022, at least at the time of this video's production. 3 of the airline's A220s sport fairly unique liveries apart from the standard lime green and white. These jets have been repainted in special liveries to reflect the unique DNA of airBaltic and the Baltic nations, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. The first special livery aircraft actually made its debut in 2018 when airBaltic unveiled an aircraft featuring the flag of Latvia. This was a gift from the airline to Latvia on the country's centenary. In addition to the design, the aircraft itself bears the name of Latvia's capital city, Riga. The additional 2 aircraft sporting the flags of Estonia and Lithuania were unveiled during a special event in August 2019 to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Baltic Way, which was a record-long human chain that connected all 3 countries in August 1989 in a peaceful demonstration for national independence. In more recent news for airBaltic and its fleet, the carrier received approval in April to increase the seating capacity on its A220-300 fleet to 149 passengers. Having an initial capacity of 145 seats, this change in the certified maximum passenger capacity means that the airline can unblock seats in its aircraft cabins that were, up until now, unavailable for passenger usage. At the moment, not all airBaltic A220s are flying for airBaltic. Indeed, SAS has recruited the airline and its jets to fly select European services on its behalf. The decision was prompted by the Scandinavian carrier suffering from crew shortages and a potential strike from pilots over salary cuts. Earlier in the year, 2 A220s were also wet leased to German carrier Eurowings. Commenting on these deals and the appeal of his carrier's jets, CEO Martin Gauss said,
There's a very significant demand for A220 aircraft, especially the 300 version. So I guess if we would try, we could lease out the whole of our fleet this year. We had earmarked up to 15 aircraft, depending on what the summer would develop, which we could have given out. We gave out 11 now, and that's it. We can't give out more. But the aircraft and the demand is not only coming from Europe. We have global demand for the aircraft and working now on some of the winter leads in different continents. The reason is the aircraft is really performing well if it is about the economics, and it has 149 seats, which means the aircraft is usable if the route is not yet a route where you need a 220-seater, so 737-800 or an A320 or an A321. And I guess that a lot of the carriers now are looking for lift, which is 150 seats, but having no restrictions on the passenger comfort. Because any other aircraft, which is or the 737-800s, comes also with smaller cabin or different range. And therefore, the only aircraft available currently in the market is that aircraft. And then it comes with a very, very positive economics on the environment, on the noise and on the fuel flow.
Apart from engine concerns, it appears that the A220 has been performing quite well for airBaltic. Given its exceptional fuel efficiency and its positive reputation for passenger comfort, it looks like the airline's big bet on the CS300 or A220 paid off handsomely. But what do you think? Did the airline take an acceptable level of risk in becoming so dependent on a single aircraft type? Share your thoughts and opinions by leaving a comment. Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles every week. If you're looking for the latest aviation news and insights, visit simpleflying.com.